sirens cut through the valley like a wound tearing open the night. Red and blue lights bounced off the tin roofs and bare trees, splintering across the dark fields that surrounded the farmhouse. The road that led here wasn't really a road at all, just a ribbon of dirt, rutted and narrow, disappearing into acres of dead grass and skeletal fence posts. Out here, silence usually ruled. Tonight, it was shattered. 4 hours earlier, a 4-year-old boy named Evan Cole had been tucked into bed. Now, his bed was empty. State troopers moved fast, boots crunching over frozen soil, radios hissing with clipped commands. A helicopter thumped overhead, its searchlight dragging long white scars across the land. The beam passed over a child's plastic toy truck lying on its side near the porch steps, then swept on, indifferent. Inside the farmhouse, the air smelled like old wood, coffee gone cold, and fear. Evan's mother sat at the kitchen table, her hands locked together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She stared at the door that led to the back field, as if expecting her son to wander in at any second, muddy and smiling like he always did. Her husband stood near the sink, unmoving, his jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. Neither of them cried, not yet. Police had asked the same questions again and again. When did you last see him? Who else was here today? Did Evan ever wander off before? The answers hadn't changed. Evan was last seen just after sunset. He'd been playing with his trucks in the living room while dinner cooked. At some point, no one could say exactly when, he was gone. No screams, no broken locks, no blood, just absence. Outside, a canine unit worked the perimeter. The dog pulled hard toward the tree line, nose low, tail stiff. It followed a faint scent across the yard, past the rusted swing set, toward the old fence that marked the edge of the property. There, the trail hesitated, then vanished. Lost it, the handler said quietly. These words hit like a punch. This wasn't a lost child search anymore. This was something else. By sunrise, the farmhouse had become a crime scene. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind as investigators arrived from the county seat, then the state capitol. The case had already escalated, too fast, some said. But the lead investigator, Detective Myra Klein, didn't believe in coincidence. Kids didn't just disappear. Klein stood near the fence line, hands in her coat pockets, eyes scanning the field. She'd worked murders, abductions, domestic nightmares that left entire families in ruins. But missing child cases were different. They crawled under your armor and stay there. 4 years old, she thought. Old enough to talk, old enough to trust. She turned as a uniformed officer approached. We've canvassed a 2-mile radius. No sightings, no tracks beyond the fence. Klein nodded. What about the house? Clean, too clean. That caught her attention. Inside, the house told a story that didn't match panic. Evan's shoes were lined neatly by the door. His jacket hung on a hook, untouched. No sign he'd gone outside on his own, which meant someone else had taken him or lured him. Klein walked back inside, stopping in the doorway to Evan's room. The walls were painted with faded clouds. A stuffed bear lay half-tucked under the blanket, its glass eyes staring. On the nightstand sat a sippy cup, still half full. She felt a familiar anger rise, hot and sharp. Someone had done this, and someone knew exactly how. The first 48 hours were chaos. Volunteers flooded the area, combing fields and creeks, calling Evan's name until their voices broke. Flyers went up in every gas station and diner within 100 miles. The boy's face, big eyes, crooked smile, stared out from every screen. Tips poured in. A white van seen near the highway. A man walking a child down a dirt road at dusk. A scream heard in the distance that might have been a fox. Most of it led nowhere. Detective Klein focused on what she always did first, the inner circle. People Evan knew. The Coles lived isolated, but not alone. Their land bordered 2 other properties. Family members came and went. Friends stopped by. A babysitter watched Evan twice a week. And then
there was Caleb Hargreave. Caleb lived in a small trailer at the edge of the cold property, just past the fence where the scent trail died. He'd been there for nearly a year, helping with repairs, doing odd jobs, fixing engines. He was a family friend, someone Evan called Uncle Cal. Caleb was around the night Evan vanished. That fact alone didn't make him guilty, but it made him relevant. Klein read through Caleb's file as the interview room clock ticked loudly. 32 years old, no violent criminal record, a handful of minor charges, trespassing, disorderly conduct, nothing that screamed monster. Still, Klein had learned long ago that monsters rarely announce themselves. Caleb sat across from her now, hands folded, eyes rimmed red. He looked exhausted, shaken, convincing if you believed in that sort of thing. I loved that kid. I'd never heard him. Klein watched him closely. When did you last see Evan? Earlier that evening, he was playing with his trucks, showed me this blue one he said was the fastest. A faint smile flickered, then died. That's it. I went back to my place before dark. No one saw you leave. I live 30 yards away. I don't need an audience. True enough. Klein let the silence stretch. People filled silence when they were nervous. Caleb didn't. He just stared at the table. Did Evan ever come by your trailer alone? Caleb hesitated just a beat too long. Sometimes, if he heard music or saw me working on something. Klein made a note.
When the interview ended, she wasn't sure what to think. Caleb hadn't cracked, but something about him lingered, like a shadow you couldn't quite place. Days turned into weeks. The search scaled back. Volunteers went home. The helicopter stopped flying. Evan didn't come back. Public pressure mounted. Media trucks lined the dirt road. The satellite dishes pointed skyward. Headlines shifted from "Where is Evan?" to "How could this happen?" Behind closed doors, the investigation narrowed. Phone records were pulled, financials examined. Every adult connected to Evan was scrutinized. And slowly, quietly, attention returned to Caleb. His phone showed gaps, hours with no activity the night Evan vanished. His alibi relied on no one but himself. Neighbors mentioned seeing lights on in his trailer late into the night. Still, there was no hard evidence. Until the creek. It was nearly 4 months after Evan disappeared when a local hunter found something tangled in reeds downstream from the property. The water was low, the mud cracked and dry in places. A child sneaker, blue with a torn Velcro strap. Evan's sneaker. The creek exploded with activity. Forensics teams waded through the muck, bagging debris, photographing every inch. Hope and dread twisted together as news spread. Detective Klein stood at the water's edge, staring at the slow-moving current. If Evan had gone into the creek on his own, they would have found more by now. Unless he hadn't gone in on his own. Searchers worked outward, methodical, relentless, and then, beneath an overhang of roots, they found something else. A scrap of fabric. Familiar. Too familiar. Back at the farmhouse, Klein stood in Evan's room again, this time holding the evidence bag. She glanced at the open dresser drawer, at the row of folded clothes. One shirt was missing. The fabric in the bag matched it perfectly. That night, Detective Klein authorized a full search of Caleb Hargreaves' trailer. They broke the lock just after midnight. Inside, the space was cramped and cluttered. Tools, engine parts, stacks of old magazines. Nothing obvious, nothing incriminating. Then an officer called out from the back. "Detective, you need to see this." Behind a false panel beneath the floorboards was a narrow crawl space, and inside it was a locked metal door. Klein stared at it, her pulse roaring in her ears, because whatever waited on the other side wasn't just going to change the case, it was going to change everything. The metal door didn't belong there. Detective Mara Klein stood over the open floorboards, staring down into the crawl space beneath Caleb Hargreaves' trailer.
The air that drifted up was stale, metallic, and wrong, like something sealed off for far too long. The door was small, reinforced, fitted with a heavy padlock, scratched by repeated attempts to open it up. Someone had planned this. Klein didn't touch it. She didn't have to. The technicians were already suiting up, cameras flashing, every movement recorded. Evidence like this had a way of rotting cases from the inside if handled wrong. When the lock finally snapped, the sound echoed louder than it should have. The door swung inward. What lay beyond wasn't a room, it was a space carved out beneath the trailer, reinforced with plywood and steel beams. A bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow glow. The walls were insulated, soundproofed. The floor was covered in old rugs, layered one on top of another. And in the corner sat a child-sized folding chair. Klein felt her throat tighten. There were no toys, no blankets, no signs of comfort, just control. For a moment, no one spoke. Then an officer cursed under his breath. "This wasn't storage," he said. "No," Klein replied quietly. "It was preparation." They found rope, duct tape, a small plastic cup with cartoon animals printed along the side. Inside, dried residue clung to the bottom, something sugary once dissolved in liquid. A sedative test was ordered immediately. Caleb Hargreave was picked up an hour later. He didn't run. Officers found him sitting on the steps of his trailer, elbows on his knees, head bowed. He didn't resist when they cuffed him. He didn't ask why. He just closed his eyes as if he'd been waiting for this moment to arrive. The media frenzy ignited instantly. Headlines screamed about the suspect known to the child. Commentators speculated, theorized, accused. Caleb's face, gaunt, unshaven, hollow-eyed, looped endlessly on cable news. But despite the images, despite the crawl space, despite the evidence piling up like stones on a grave, one question refused to go away. Where was Evan? In the interrogation room, Caleb sat across from Detective Klein, hands trembling slightly now. The bravado he'd worn weeks earlier was gone. In its place was something fragile and dangerous. "You built that space," Klein said, flat and calm. "Why?" Caleb swallowed. "I didn't hurt him. That wasn't my question." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. "I was trying to protect him," Caleb finally said. Klein didn't flinch. She had heard this before. Monsters often wrap themselves in the language of saviors. "From what?" she asked. Caleb's eyes darted to the corner of the room, then back. "You don't know what went on in that house," he said, his voice rising. "The yelling, the neglect, they left him alone all the time. I watched it happen." "You watched," Klein repeated, "and you decided to intervene." "I decided to help." Klein slid a photo across the table, the chair in the crawl space. Caleb stared at it, jaw clenched. He needed somewhere safe. Safe. Klein let the silence work again, then asked the only question that mattered. "Where is Evan now?" Caleb's eyes filled with tears. Real or not, Klein couldn't tell. "He's not there anymore," he whispered. The search expanded overnight. With Caleb in custody, investigators re-examined every inch of land he'd ever stepped foot on. Crews returned to the creek, this time with heavy equipment. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Drones scanned the woods beyond the property. Nothing. Days passed, then weeks. Caleb's story shifted subtly each time he spoke. He claimed Evan came willingly, claimed he only kept him overnight, claimed the boy ran off when he wasn't looking. Every version contradicted the last. Forensics results came back from the cup found beneath the trailer. Traces of an over-the-counter sleep aid, crushed, dissolved, administered in liquid form. Evan hadn't gone quietly. Meanwhile, the Coles were pulled back into the spotlight. Police revisited their timeline, their finances, their past. Online sleuths dug up old social media posts, dissecting every photo, every caption.
the narrative began to fracture. Maybe the parents weren't as innocent as they seemed. Maybe Caleb was a convenient scapegoat. Maybe Evan was already gone before anyone noticed.
Detective Klein felt the weight of it all pressing in. The public wanted answers. The press wanted closure. But she wanted the truth, and it was slipping further away every day. Then, 3 months after Caleb's arrest, a call came in to change the direction of the case once again. A woman in a neighboring county had gone to police with a story she'd been afraid to tell. She lived alone on a remote stretch of road nearly 50 miles away. Late one night, just days after Evan vanished, she'd heard knocking at her door. When she looked through the peephole, she saw a man standing there with a small child bundled in a blanket. She didn't open the door. It didn't feel right, she said, her voice shaking as she recounted it. The kid wasn't crying, he wasn't moving, and the man kept whispering his name over and over. "What name?" Klein asked. The woman swallowed. "Evan." A composite sketch was created based on her description. It looked nothing like Caleb. The new suspect had a name, Jonah Reed. Reed was a drifter with a history of petty theft, illegal work, and false identities. He'd passed through the region around the time Evan disappeared, staying briefly at campgrounds and abandoned properties. More troubling, Reed had once been employed by the Coles. Years earlier, before Evan was born, he'd helped build part of the farmhouse, lived on the land for nearly 6 months, then vanished after a dispute over unpaid wages. No one had mentioned him during the initial investigation. When Klein brought this up to Evan's parents, the reaction was immediate and telling. Evan's mother went pale. "I didn't think he mattered," she said quietly. "That was years ago." "But you recognize the name," Klein replied. "Yes." Klein felt something shift. Did Evan know him? Her husband answered this time. "He came by once, a few months back, just to say hello." Just to say hello. Security footage from a gas station 40 miles away showed Jonah Reed buying supplies 2 days after Evan vanished. Among them, bottled water, children's pain reliever, and a blue toy truck, the same model Evan had shown Caleb. The timeline cracked open. If Reed had Evan, even briefly, then Caleb might not have acted alone, or at all. Confronted with the new evidence, Caleb's composure finally shattered. "They said they'd take him somewhere safe," he sobbed during a recorded interview. "They said they had a place, that I was just holding them until they came." "They?" Klein pressed. Caleb shook his head violently. "I don't know their names. He told me not to ask." "He?" "Jonah." The room went silent. Caleb claimed Jonah Reed had contacted him weeks before the disappearance, said he knew what was happening to Evan, said he could help if Caleb helped first. A network, a plan, a handoff. Caleb admitted to sedating Evan, admitted to hiding him, but he swore Jonah Reed had taken the boy alive. "I thought he'd be better off. I thought I was doing the right thing." The words echoed in Klein's mind long after the interview ended. Because if Caleb was telling the truth, if even part of it was true, then Evan's disappearance wasn't the act of a lone predator. It was something far more complex and far more dangerous. The manhunt for Jonah Reed began quietly, then all at once. His aliases spanned 3 states. His last confirmed sighting was weeks old. He knew how to disappear. But as Klein reviewed the case files late one night, a detail nagged at her. The blue toy truck. Why buy it after Evan vanished, unless the child was still alive? She pulled up the gas station footage again, frame by frame. Reed exited the store, bag in hand. He paused, glanced off camera, then smiled at someone unseen. Klein froze the image. There, reflected faintly in the glass door, was the outline of a small figure standing beside him. The next morning, police raided an abandoned farmhouse linked to one of Reed's aliases. Inside, they found evidence of recent occupation, food wrappers, footsteps, a child's sock, but no child. And scrawled on one of the walls, written in uneven, hurried letters, were 3 words that made Detective Klein's blood run cold. "He is still here." They didn't know if it was a message or a warning,
And somewhere in the silence that followed, time continued to run out for a 4-year-old boy who had already been missing far too long. The farmhouse sat at the end of a forgotten road, its windows boarded, its roof sagging like a tired spine. The words on the wall, "He is still here," echoed in Detective Mara Klein's mind as she stood just outside the threshold, dawn leaking into the sky behind her. The message had been written recently. The dust on the floor told a story of hurried movement, small footprints overlapping larger ones, then veering toward the back door. They were close enough to feel the heat of it. Inside, the air was stale with damp wood and mold. The search teams moved with practiced precision, cataloging every scrap, every fiber, every whisper of a lead. A child's sock lay beneath a table leg, small and gray with dirt. Evan's size, Evan's age, Evan's life, reduced to a piece of fabric and the ache it carried. Klein crouched, careful not to disturb it. "Baggin'," she said softly, "and run prints on the floor again." A technician looked up. "We've got 2 sets, one adult, boots, the other barefoot." Barefoot? Evan hated shoes, his mother had said. He kicked them off his moment he could. Klein straightened, her chest tight. "Which way?" The tech pointed toward the back. "Out to the field, then nothing." Again with the nothing. Outside, the land fell away into scrub and trees, a maze of brush and gullies that could swallow a person whole. Drones lifted into the air, the camera scanning, their quiet hum the only sound beside the wind. Hours passed, then a call crackled over the radio. "Detective, possible sighting, 10 miles south, local truck stop." The truck stop was a lonely island of light in a sea of asphalt and darkness. 18-wheelers idled in long rows, their engines growling like restless animals. Inside the diner, the smell of grease and burnt coffee clung to everything. A waitress stood near the counter, arms crossed tight across her chest. She was pale, shaken. He came in late, man with a kid. The kid was quiet, too quiet. "What time?" asked Klein. "Just after midnight. He ordered soup, for the boy too, but the kid didn't touch it." "Did he say anything?" The waitress swallowed. "The man did all the talking, kept saying they were on a road trip, kept saying the kid was tired." Klein slid a photo across the counter. Jonah Reed stared back, his eyes empty, unreadable. The waitress nodded immediately. "That's him." "And the child?" The waitress closed her eyes. Blind, big eyes. He looked scared. The security footage confirmed it. Grainy, but clear enough. Jonah Reed sat in a booth, hunched forward, his arm draped possessively around a small figure wrapped in a hoodie far too big for him. Evan's face appeared for a split second when he turned toward the camera, eyes wide, mouth pressed into a thin line. Alive. The room seemed to tilt. "How long did they stay?" Klein asked. "Maybe 20 minutes. Then they left, headed south." South meant highways. Highways meant options. Too many. An alert went out across 3 states. Reed's vehicle, a dented gray sedan with a cracked taillight, was flagged. Roadblocks were discussed, then dismissed. Too risky. If Reed felt cornered, Klein didn't finish the thought. The first break came from an unexpected place. Caleb Hargreave. From his cell, he requested to speak with Detective Klein again. He looked worse than before, thinner, eyes sunken, guilt etched deep into his face. "I remembered something," he said, voice shaken. "Something I didn't tell you." Klein studied him. "You've had a lot of time to remember." "I know, but this matters." "Talk." Caleb swallowed hard. "Jonah talked about a place, somewhere he called the Quiet House. Said it was where no one listened, where you could disappear." "Did he say where?" "No, just near water. Old, forgotten."
Water. Klein's mind raced through the map. Lakes, rivers, abandoned properties. Then it clicked. A decommissioned pumping station, shut down decades ago, remote, hidden, near a bend in the river no one used anymore. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. The convoy moved fast, lights off as they turned down the access road. Trees crowded close, branches scraping against vehicles like grasping hands. The pumping station emerged from the darkness, a squat concrete structure, half swallowed by vines, its windows broken and black. Klein raised her fist. The vehicle stopped. They approached on foot. The door hung ajar. Inside, the smell hit them first. Stagnant water, rust, something human and unwashed. Flashlights cut through the gloom, beams bouncing off peeling paint and graffiti. "Police!" Klein called. "Jonah Reed, come out with your hands up!" Silence answered. They moved deeper, and then they heard it. A sound so small, it almost disappeared into the hum of the building. A whimper. Klein ran. In a back room, behind a bank of old machinery, they found a makeshift bed, blankets on the floor, a backpack, empty bottles, and curled up against the wall, shaking, was Evan, alive. For one impossible second, the world held its breath. Then Evan looked up, his eyes locking onto Klein's badge, and he began to cry. She dropped to her knees, hands up, voice gentle. "Hey buddy, you're okay. We're here now." He crawled into her arms without hesitation, clutching her jacket like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "Where's Jonah?" an officer asked urgently. Klein shook her head. Gone. The quiet house had lived up to its name, but not long enough. Evan was rushed to a hospital, surrounded by doctors, wrapped in warmth and care. He was dehydrated, exhausted, frightened, but alive. The news exploded across every screen. A miracle, they called it, a miracle pulled from the brink. But miracles don't erase damage. Evan spoke little at first. When he did, it was in fragments, memories stitched together by fear. "Jonah said we were hiding. He got mad when I cried. He said Uncle Cal was bad." The words cut deep. Caleb's reaction when told Evan had been found was immediate and devastating. He broke down completely, sobbing into his hands. "I didn't know. I kept repeating." But knowing or not knowing didn't change what he'd done. Meanwhile, Jonah Reed vanished again. His car was found abandoned near a freight yard 2 counties over. Inside, police found maps, cash, and a notebook filled with dates and names. Some of the names were crossed out, others weren't. Klein stared at the list late into the night. Patterns emerged, places, children. This wasn't Jonah's first time. The realization settled like ice in her veins. Pressure mounted as the manhunt stretched on. Tips came in from across the country, sightings, rumors, shadows that dissolved under scrutiny. Reed became a ghost, slipping through cracks, always one step ahead. Then Evan said something that changed everything. He was sitting in a hospital playroom, crayons scattered across the table, when he looked up at Klein and asked a simple question. "Is the other man gone too?" Klein froze. "What other man?" Evan frowned, searching for the words. "The one who watched." "Watched where?" "At the house, the quiet house." Klein felt her pulse spike. "There was a second someone with Jonah?" Evan nodded slowly. "He didn't talk, he just looked." A second figure. Klein went back to the pumping station files, the surveillance footage, the reports. One camera angle previously dismissed now caught her eye. A shadow moving against the far wall, tall, still. They'd missed him. And if Evan was right, if there was another man, then Jonah Reed wasn't acting alone, which meant the danger hadn't ended. It had only shifted. 2 nights later, Detective Klein received a message on her phone from an unknown number. No text, just a photo. It showed a familiar stretch of road, a farmhouse in the distance, yellow tape fluttering in the wind. The Cole property. Below the image were 6 words. "You found the boy. Too late." Klein's blood ran cold. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door, already calling it in. Whatever Jonah Reed had planned, whatever web he'd spun, it wasn't finished. And somewhere in the dark, someone was watching, waiting. Because the truth behind Evan's disappearance was bigger, darker, and far more deliberate than anyone had imagined.
and the final reckoning was coming fast. The squad cars reached the Cole property in under 12 minutes, too fast for comfort, too slow to erase dread. Detective Mara Klein stepped out before the engine fully died, her eyes already scanning the farmhouse. Yellow tape still fluttered along the fence line from months earlier, sun-faded and frayed. Floodlights cut through the darkness, throwing harsh shadows against the walls. The front door was open. Klein felt it then, the instinct she'd learned to trust more than evidence, the sense that something had already happened and we were arriving at the echo. "Clear the house," she ordered. Officers moved in pairs, weapons drawn, boots heavy against the wooden floor. The farmhouse smelled different now. Not fear, not panic, resignation. In the living room, a single lamp burned. On the coffee table lay a manila envelope with Klein's name written across it in thick black marker. She opened it slowly. Inside were photographs, not of Evan, of other children, different ages, different towns, all candid, all unaware, taken from across streets, behind fences, through windows. Each photo dated, each location marked. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note. "You stopped one story, not the others." Klein's jaw tightened. "Detective," an officer called from the hallway. "You need to see this." In the master bedroom, the mattress had been stripped bare, drawers pulled open, the closet door stood ajar, and written on the inside wall, carved deep into the wood with a blade, were words that made Klein's stomach drop. He was never the target. The truth unraveled quickly after that, too quickly. The second man Evan had mentioned, the Watcher, was identified within hours. Marcus Vale, former social services contractor, background in family evaluations, temporary placements, the kind of man trusted with access. Vale had crossed paths with Jonah Reed years earlier working disaster relief. Two men who knew systems failed, who knew how easily people looked away. Together, they'd built something. Quiet, slow, careful. Caleb Hargreave hadn't been the architect. He'd been the key. Chosen because he was lonely, because he wanted to matter, because he could be convinced that taking a child was saving him. Jonah used him. Marcus planned everything else. The photos in the envelope weren't threats. They were a map. Marcus Vale was arrested at dawn in a rental home 2 states away. No resistance, no denial. He sat calmly as cuffs clicked into place, his expression almost peaceful. "I wondered how long it would take," he said. Jonah Reed was never found. His phone last pinged near a shipping port. No body, no confirmation, just absence. The case closed anyway, on paper. Evan went home 3 weeks later, not to the farmhouse. That place was sold, its walls too heavy with memory, but to a quieter town, closer to people, closer to help. He slept with the lights on. He asked questions no 4-year-old should know how to ask. Sometimes he woke screaming. Sometimes he didn't wake at all, staring into nothing long after his eyes opened. His parents tried. Therapy helped. Love helped. Time helped a little. But some scars don't fade. They just sink deeper. Detective Klein stayed on the task force that formed in the aftermath. The names in the notebook led to other cases, other arrests, other children who were never taken because someone caught the pattern in time.
Slowly, at a cost. Late one night, months after the trials ended and the cameras moved on, Klein received another message. Unknown number, no text, just a photo. A blue toy truck sitting on a park bench. No note, no signature. She stared at it for a long time before deleting the message. Because some victories are loud, and some are just the sound of a door quietly locking behind you, hoping whatever was chasing you stays on the other side. They said the case was over, but Klein never parked her car without checking the mirror, never walked past a playground without counting faces. Because silence, she'd learned, doesn't mean safety. It just means something is waiting. And if this story shook you, you're not ready for the next one. Stay close. Don't look away.